Welcome once again to Viger Please, a vile visit Bejor. My name is Joseph.
And I'm your co-host, Peter.
Peter, when you and I were talking about Enterprise, there was one thing that united us, and that was a disgust of one particular episode. One episode that seemed to be dripping with a certain hot, white, sticky substance we couldn't get away from. Do you remember that?
A night in sickbay was wretched.
Well, no, the other one with hot, drippy substances.
Oh. The
Vox Sola.
Yeah,
Vox Sola. You know who else had a lot to say about the ejaculate monster that was Vox Sola?
Anybody who's been through puberty.
But also one other person, someone unique in terms of the folks that we've talked to, someone with an audience, somebody who has published their views to thousands upon thousands of people, and that is YouTuber Allison Pregler, who for some reason said yes when I said, "Can I talk to you about a cum monster?" Allison, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm glad we're united in Vox Sola, a very dirty-looking mid-episode of Voyage or Enterprise. I get this mixed up sometimes. Very similar.
Allison, I cannot thank you enough. Your videos are a huge hit with our little community. Vox Sola was definitely the one where I think we all enjoyed your takes as much as we did. The algorithm blessed me with it after Peter and I recorded our episode, so it was so nice to see that we weren't alone in the universe.
Yeah, there were some people that were like, "Oh, I just don't see it." I'm like,
what?
Don't you know? Who are those people? Who are they?
No. But it was really, watching the behind the scenes on that episode was really fascinating because it's like, man, there was a lot of crap going on.
I cannot wait to talk to you about it, but I do want to give everyone an opportunity because you are more than merely one video about a giant cum monster on Enterprise. In fact, I understand you've had quite a prolific internet career. Your channel is a huge show, a cavalcade of different pop culture commentary essays and videos, all of it very funny. So please, if you would like to talk a bit about yourself.
Well, I've been doing the movie critic, YouTuber, video type career since about 2009. So it's been a while, but I've probably only been good for a little bit. but yeah, I talk about So Bad It's Good movies. I talk about all of Baywatch. I'm sure all of the Star Trek fans are really into that.
Absolutely.
I talk about TV, talk about Star Trek, all sorts of different things, and I try to be funny.
What made you come to the decision that you wanted to put yourself in front of the internet? Because by 2009, everybody kind of had a good understanding of what could happen if you step up in front of a platform and expose yourself, the good things that can come with it, and, you know, as we're all aware, the bad things.
Well, I got started because I was on a fan forum for a show called Big Wolf on Campus. And that is a detail that's irrelevant. But I was on this forum and...
Peter, am I not in the demo for that one?
No, it's kids in early 2000s watching crappy Canadian kids shows about werewolves. But anyway, so someone on there linked to a video by someone named the Nostalgia Chick, which people know as Lindsay Ellis these days. She's really huge. She's way bigger than me. But anyway, she was on a site called That Guy with the Glasses with nostalgia critic Doug Walker. He's still doing his thing, being dumb. Anyway, so I saw the videos on thatguywiththeglasses.com and everyone reviewed movies on there and everyone had their own little niche. And I thought that would be something really fun to do because I did acting in theater. I liked performing, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do to perform. And I had one movie on my computer at the time and it was Undefeatable with Cynthia Rothrock.
Yes!
And it's a legendary crappy movie. So I'm like, I'll review this. I'll be the crappy movie reviewer. So that's what I started doing. I started posting on their forums, eventually made it on the site with a lot of other people who do similar type things. And it just went on from there.
Did you do Undefeatable before Red Letter Media did?
Yes.
Well, good.
I did that in like 2009.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You're way ahead of them. Way ahead of them. Yeah, that's an all-timer. That's a good one to start on.
Oh yeah, I love that movie. My video wasn't very good. It was really bad. But the movie is really, really funny, and it got me on Cynthia Rothrock movies. It taught me a lot about movies in general because I didn't really know a lot about anything. I was 19 when I did the video, and and I learned a lot as I went along and like the process.
What at this stage in your YouTube career, I mean, is this a full-time job for you, or do you have a day job?
No, it's a full-time job, but it wasn't always a full-time job.
When you started initially, what was your career track?
What was I doing at the time? I think I was 19, so I might have still been working at Arby's or at Harkins, the movie theater. Yeah. My jobs before this were, service jobs. Like I worked at Hastings, which is, I think, defunct now. It was like a media store. And I worked at a pumpkin patch at one point. Yeah.
If anything's going to prepare you for YouTube, definitely it's pumpkin
working
patch.
At a pumpkin patch, yeah.
So, watching your content, the editing style is there and it's good.
Good.
Well, thank you.
I was going to ask, like, is this something you went to school for? Was this all just been figuring it out in the trenches?
It's figuring it out as I went along. I took one class in like high school that was a media thing, but I didn't learn anything there. It was just kind of dicking around for a while with a bunch of outdated stuff. Like I didn't really learn anything from that. It was just having editing software and doing this for over a decade. Like the editing and the way that it was shot and my videos back then were really bad. But I learned something along the way. That's how you do it. You just you learn.
Peter and I cringe at our old content as well.
Oh yeah,
And we don't have the benefit of it being when we were young. It was when we were 30.
Yeah.
But as long as you're doing it and you're having fun, there's not a too late to start. Yeah. Starting at 19 didn't make me any better at it. It just meant I started when I was 19.
And I think fans can smell too when someone's in it for passion or when they're just there looking to try and get the mattress advertising opportunities,
Yeah. There's been a lot of people you meet along the way that are I want to do videos, but I don't really want to put the work into it. And if I don't get 1 million views immediately, I'm not successful.
Can't look at it that way.
Yeah.
Peter and I, fortunately, we like Star Trek enough just to do this for even if it was 2 people watching. We've got a few more than that, but not so much more.
Was there a tipping point for you where ooh, wait, this took off. People know my name now. You can Google me and stuff's coming up. Did it hit you all at once or was it a slow build?
Well, getting on That Guy with the Glasses is what got the audience for me. And we have a long and sordid history, thatguywiththeglasses.com, but it was huge. And this was before I was on YouTube. We would be on websites like blip.tv. These are things that don't exist anymore. But before I was a YouTuber, I was doing that. And there was a huge audience there. It was immediate and probably quicker than it should have been. But that was how huge the site was at the time. And it kept growing from there. And it's kind of, I don't want to say hit a plateau, but it's hit a good amount where it's not growing anymore, but an audience that I'm happy with and doing the things that I like to do rather than just things that I think will get clicks.
Speaking of things that you have done, I'm gonna go ahead and put in a Star Trek question here real quick. So, and this speaks to your editing skill as well. So your video on Night and Sick Bay, I think, was your first one that you did about Enterprise.
It was the first about Star Trek. I hadn't even watched any other Star Trek besides Enterprise.
Oh my God, you started with Enterprise? How did you ever watch Star Trek after that?
Okay. Well, I guess the real way that watching Star Trek went with for me is because my dad's a Trekkie. So when I was growing up, I would see Voyager on the air, but I wouldn't watch it regularly. But that was the one that he would watch. So I remember seeing Threshold as it aired.
Okay.
And thinking it was gross and being confused and seeing little bits of Star Trek as I went along. But the first one I really watched all the way through was Enterprise because I love Quantum Leap. So I was I want to see Scapacula. Yeah. And I'm this is really, really boring. Seeing bits of Enterprise made me think that Star Trek was all boring, sexy stuff that's not really sexy with a lot of status reports. And I'm man, Star Trek is really boring.
And that takes a lot to take the words boring and sexy and be able to use them in the same sentence.
But it is.
And that's it. Joe jumped the gun on me. I was going to pass you the Star Trek baton. Before we get into the meat and potatoes here, I do want to talk Quantum Leap.
Okay. You know what, Peter? I will allow it. I understand. He's been waiting for this for a while because I've never watched much Quantum Leap, and he has.
How? It was everywhere. It was so accessible.
Because you're like 3 years older than me, and that's what matters here. I just was too young to be watching it when it was on.
Well, shame on you.
It's true.
You're way deeper in the weeds than I am. I want to ask you a technical question.
Okay.
Walk me through the lore on Al's link change from that 80s brown Corningware to Legos. Like, did they ever describe that?
Oh yeah. There. You know what? There's a friend of mine. I can send you a DM from him. He's an expert on the hand links from Quantum Leap because he's a prop maker and he's studied them in such detail. He also made a replica of the gummy bear hand link, which was one of the most difficult props to make. You wouldn't think that it's that difficult, but it was extremely difficult to make.
I'll tell you, as a child with Legos, it was very easy, but I'm sure he was at a much
Oh yeah, no. His company, Replica Props, like he works with another guy, and his name's Morgan Felden, and he knows everything about the hand links. What I can tell you on the show is there was a bunch of them, and they kept redesigning them because Donald Belisario just wanted to keep perfecting it. So it started out with a translucent piece of plastic in the pilot, and then it became sort of a calculator looking thing that had some phrases that would go across it. And in the middle of an episode, I believe in canon, he breaks the hand link from hitting it so much, and then they upgrade to the gummy bear one, is what they call the Lego looking one. And that's the in-canon explanation, is that it's
delightful.
But there's several different versions of each one of those as well.
I'm so happy you could have this moment, Peter. You've been waiting to have this moment for a long time. I know I've disappointed you.
Yeah, if you go to Replica Props, they still have those hand links for sale, and they're a little pricey, but they're really good because they light up, they make sounds.
It seems like really a lot of your behind the scenes information, it's not coming from web searches. Like, you've got a lot of strong industry connections that are giving you firsthand knowledge on this. How have you been able to farm those connections and bring that content onto the channel?
I mean, I know a lot of people from Quantum Leap through another podcast that I used to host called the Quantum Leap Podcast. And we would interview a lot of people from the show as we looked at the episodes. We would talk to Deborah Pratt. She was one of the showrunners along with Donald Belisario.
Wow.
Wow.
We also, yeah, she's awesome. And we would go through each episode. We went through the reboot as it was going along, made a lot of connections there. A lot of them are through my co-hosts on the show. So it wasn't really through me because I you wouldn't know it from here, but I have anxiety, so I don't like talking to people that I get really nervous.
That's a tough line of work you've lined yourself up for.
Well, usually it's me or me and my husband talking about stuff. It's not really like interviewing people from the industry, but I've been lucky enough to talk to a lot of the people involved with the show. One of my friends and co-hosts from the show, who's sadly passed away, he did a book about Quantum Leap that was in several volumes. I have one of them here. I can show you. People in the podcast aren't gonna be able to see it, but this is like Goblet of Fire length book all about Quantum Leap.
Yeah, and, that's easily a 500-page tome right there. That's a medical content.
Oh, it's everything you'd ever want to know. And Matt was the best person. He was best friends with Deborah Pratt, and I got to learn a lot about Quantum Leap through that.
Let me finish my Trek question, because we do have an audience that has a demand to talk.
They're like, enough of this other Scott Bakula stuff.
We'll have time. We're going to return to it.
I don't want to hear about the longest yard.
Night in Sick Bay. I think is your review of Night in Sick Bay is the very first time I ever saw something said by someone else that I wish I was smart enough to have said myself, which was dog funeral nightmare that turns into a sex dream. What
the fuck was going on? What was going on with Night in Sick Bay?
You said you were disgusted, I think, at one point. 7 years later, do you think that the episode killed Bourbon Era Trek? Because that was your premise. Like, this killed Bourbon Era Trek.
It was.
And this was at the start of your journey watching Trek, the sound of it.
I feel like I could be misremembering. I feel like when I reviewed Night in Sickbay, I hadn't even finished watching Enterprise. I just knew that it was bad. And I will say, and I did talk about this in another video, and I think in Vox Sola maybe, that Enterprise did get better. But the first 2 seasons were really, really dog shit.
Dear Doctor, you mentioned season 3 and 4, which I think everyone knows season 4 is good. That's like a Star Trek.
Yeah, season 4, because it was actually in the hands of someone who cared more about Star Trek, I think,
than trying to be Manny Koto.
Than trying to be sexy all the time. But yeah, like Night in Sickbay, I do think killed Star Trek for a while until they came back with the movies and with the stuff that Paramount has been doing. Because that one, Night in Sickbay, I think got some of their highest views because it aired alongside the Super Bowl or something.
Was that what boosted it?
Yeah, I think it had some prime slot and everyone saw that and it was so bad. Like, I can laugh at it and like I don't really care because by the time I got into this stuff, like Star Trek was coming back anyway. It's not like I had to sit in real time like, oh, darn, Trek is gone because they killed it with Enterprise. But I think it was what killed it because it like people thought that's what Star Trek was.
You did something in that specific video that I thought was very clever, and you cut to the UPN promo for the episode.
Oh yeah, those shitty ass promos where they're like, the captain's having sex, dude.
Yes.
And they cut to like all the shitty editing of people like turning their heads from like other parts of the episode or other episodes, and then going like, oh, breast and brightest. I did read somewhere, and I wish I remembered the source, but this was someone who was in my Discord server was telling me about that they said they were trying to appeal to the Baywatch audience, and that's part of why Enterprise was like it was, which makes no sense to me.
My God.
Yeah, but I see Baywatch, like, I love Baywatch, but like Enterprise is not Baywatch. Those things don't need to go together.
I was going to say, Peter and I have had this conversation before. Go ahead, man.
Yeah.
Was the death of UPN's writing on the wall? Did they know that they were going to have to merge into the CW and know what the content demographic of CW was and think maybe there was a way to make this show survive by sexing it up so it could appear alongside this teenage audience that they had cultivated over there? Or was it just Braga and Berman being that far out of touch? And who can really say?
I mean, I don't know what was going on with the CW merger, but like, I think a lot of that is a symptom of Berman and Braga because like that they had a lot of that in Enterprise in Voyager, and like so I compared it in one of the videos because a lot of the things that were in Voyager they just amplify in Enterprise but do it really badly. Like to Paul, they were clearly trying to do 7 of 9 again. That's why they stick her in it. That's why they stick her in the cat suit. And they're like, what if we did the nostalgia thing? It's like the original series stuff, but what if he could fuck Spock? And then they have this like romance thing going on there. And they're like, oh, everyone loved Neelix as they try to gaslight everyone. So they're like, well, what if we make him the Doctor? We'll do a Dr. Neelix. So they kind of do the same thing by trying to be sexy and have this comic relief or whatever.
You may not be aware, but you are walking into a pro Neelix zone.
Oh,
it was an earned pro Neelix zone. I want to say we started as Neelix haters. We became Neelix appreciators over the course of reviewing every episode.
I liked him as a kid, but I liked annoying characters. I will say, if there was an annoying character on a show as a kid, I enjoyed them very much.
I will say.
So you were in the focus group for George Lucas on the Jar Jar Binks stuff as a child.
we came around to Neelix as a character probably because of one specific episode of Voyager. So if you recall, there's the spot where I don't know if did you watch all of Voyager? I guess I should ask.
I did, first. Yeah. I've seen every Star Trek thing, I think, except like Prodigy and the latest season of Discovery. So.
Good.
Get into Discovery if you want.
Actually, I do intend to ask you about that here shortly. But for Neelix, Fair Trade is the episode where they are at the edge of like his understanding of the Delta Quadrant. Ends up involved in this dirty deal because he's trying to get some kind of information about what happens after this point, so that he doesn't feel like he's useless to them anymore. And it's a lot of like his.
He was self-aware at this point.
It's a real turn to like making him like oh, I've been a mercenary this whole time, but I've grown to really love and appreciate these people. And I feel like if I can't shepherd their way forward, I don't have a use to them and they're going to leave me behind. And it's an episode that's actually got a level of maturity to it that unfortunately Voyager misses on a lot.
Yeah.
But in that specific instance, it makes you actually love him as a character, and like that he doesn't understand that the role that he has on the show. He's the last one to figure it out. So I will stand for Neelix. We shed real manly tears when Homecoming came around and he wound up off the show.
Oh man, that was the biggest secret to them. Not anything else in the finale. They're like, don't let anyone know that Neelix is leaving. Incredible. I do think that there were episodes like all of Voyager where there was like potential there. If you take segments of things, there's goodness. And like with Neelix, I think one of his best episodes was the one where he dies.
Yeah,
but like,
yes,
but yeah, the one where he dies and then he is questioning the afterlife or his version of the afterlife,
the
existence of an afterlife.
Yeah, the existence of an afterlife. And I thought that was like, that's the kind of stuff I love. Like a comic relief character who suddenly has like a sober moment where you go deep into them and it isn't just like dancing with his stinky feet or whatever.
Yeah.
Like you do something with Neelix, and like occasionally they would touch on that where I'm like, this is what you should do.
The episode
of.
where him and Tom realize that they've lost their touch as con artists and have to get their cred back when they have to face the other con artists. That was a great one. It was comedic, but it was like self-aware of like, oh, we've become family men and we've kind of like lost our edge. We got to go out there and scam someone real quick before we lose our credibility.
Our subject thesis through Voyager was specifically squandered potential and how close and how often they would come to doing something great and just shoot themselves in the foot. And every now and then something would bleed through. But speaking of maturity of content, I want to jump back to fucking Spock.
Yes.
Okay.
I too want to discuss fucking Spock. That's an excellent line to take. Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's the whole thing with Enterprise and how they went down such weird avenues was that the product research they were doing, there was somehow like Yahoo or Ask Jeeves was like directing them towards like slash fic, and they're like, there's a huge audience out here.
Yeah. Absolutely, that's what it stemmed from.
Cum monsters and Kirk banging Spock and whatever other ridiculous things we were going to drag across the screen repeatedly in there. So,
well, I think part of it came from a big problem that New Trek has run into in that it can't get past Kirk and Spock. It's got to keep going back to like original series stuff no matter what you're doing. And I think that's what Enterprise was trying to do because they were billing themselves as a prequel and it was going to go back to the good old days where the captain made out with green-skinned women and stuff. I remember that ad playing constantly when it was on the air. And so I think that's what it came from. They're like, let's do that, but we'll have a sexy lady and he could fuck Spock. But they kind of missed everything that made the original series great or endearing, and they were also just running out of plots because they've been going for so long.
Yeah, what do you think of T'Pol and Trip, I guess, is really what I'm...
Oh, what do I think of T'Pol and Trip? T'Pol, I have complicated feelings about because T'Pol, I think, got done dirty a lot.
Yes.
A lot on the show, and I really feel bad for Jolene Blalock because she loved Star Trek, and she just got lumped into being sexy idiot or whatever, even though I don't think her acting was bad. I think she had everything going for her, and you could tell in except for the script, and you could tell in season 4 especially when she was allowed to do more and to not just be sexy lady. I think they found she was in a good niche there, but for so much of the show they were just making her sexy and they were degrading her in a way that was really hard to watch. I think season 3 was getting a lot better, but the start of her and Trip's relationship with the sexy massages and shit really, really fucking rubbed me the wrong way.
That was from the pilot too. That was from the pilot. Like the sexy massages and quote unquote rubbing them the wrong way was, that was like literally a joke I think Peter told when we were doing it. Like, I couldn't agree more with what you just said, frankly.
Yeah, they made it a storyline. It was throughout season 3. She was either on drugs or whatever, or she was doing
Emotional
sexy massages
crack, yeah.
with Trip, and it was just gross to me. And there was a lot of like post 9/11 stink I didn't like in that either. Yep. But they did manage to create a story arc that was more interesting and went into season 4, which I think got the balance a lot better. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. By the end with Trip and T'Pol, I don't know if I really like them as a couple, but I do think that the writing was a lot better, and pairing them up instead of her with Archer was a lot better too, because it was really gross them trying to pair them up.
It was an agency issue that was often the problem with her. Yeah. Like, she had this command authority, and she was clearly the smartest person on the ship, and she would, for whatever reason, not lift a finger to really change the world around her, and everybody was worse off for it. The crew as a whole.
Every time she tried doing something, like Archer would be like, "We didn't come here to use no probes. We didn't come here to listen to these stupid Vulcans." And then he's got to go on about how Vulcans were mean to his dad for 4 years, and I'm like, get over it.
All true. I mean, like, there's a line in not just your Night in Sickbay, but I think like all of your Enterprise videos, as you keep saying trained diplomat Jonathan Archer whenever you invoke him as a character. And it's maddening in those first 3 seasons, really, where he just acts exactly the opposite of the person that I think they intended him to be.
Yeah, they go on about how he's a trained diplomat and he does everything that he shouldn't do. Night in Sickbay was just the perfect example of that. And I think that's where they have the line where Trip says, "You're a trained diplomat." But he's dicking around like, why are you so mad that my dog pissed on your trees or whatever?
I'm happy I didn't watch a majority of your content prior to us completing Enterprise, and I'm sure it's something you run into as well, where like you're afraid of assimilating other people's idea and content theft and stuff like that, and sitting there and watching you again harp on like that trained diplomat thing. It's like, yes, thank God there's, and it's not like you're over there watching the stuff with a microscope and a notebook, right? Like, it's just casual viewing. People should be able to see this. How did it survive the writer's room? This is awful. This is not a character that you can at any point like go, I'm glad this guy is in charge. And using Scott Bakula in that capacity, like, they try to have these scenes where he's mad or he's being mean. And like, Scott Bakula just seems like this good-natured guy that I think
I've never heard anything bad about him.
The meanest he can be is like a playful Labrador retriever, right?
Oh, yeah,
he's chewing people out.
Yeah.
And you're like,
Scott Bakula is great. He has a great range, but when he tries to be mean, he does this thing where he's got like he's smelling something bad, and we're
talking about the Mirror Universe episodes.
They do the Mirror Universe, which is amazing, and I love those episodes because they can just be so hammy with it. But when they go into season 3, they're like, "We gave him a haircut, and he's gritty Archer," and you're like,
Is he though?
Is he Archer though? Which is weird because they cast him like they gave him a beagle and they were like, Archer's like the everyman. He's like the friends with everyone, except he's not friends with everyone. He's like belittling everyone and like bitching at them. And they're like, "Oh, can we go in and talk to Archer? He's mad about these aliens because they don't like Earth stuff." And I'm like, why is he doing this? Why are they writing him this way? Why can't he just be the nice guy? Like, I think what they wanted with him was what they ended up doing with Pike in Strange New Worlds, where he's kind of like the buddy, but he's got to step up and when he has to take command, but they didn't quite nail that.
I mean, maybe, I don't know if this is going to be a controversial take or not, but I'll put it out there. Anson Mount is a better actor than Scott Bakula, like in terms of being able to portray that. Like, his portrayal of Pike is the best thing about Strange New Worlds.
I think he has overcome some bad writing in Discovery, and Strange New Worlds has done the character a lot better. I think Enterprise is really tough for like any actor.
True, fair enough. Like, his writing has been better, which, you know, that's a low bar to clear, but it is a bar that was cleared. Yeah, no, go ahead, Peter.
I like that Scott Bakula had the star power coming in, that they built Archer for him, even though they did it very poorly. But he was able to come in with enough gravity that he was able to put a stop to some nonsense on the set. And it looks like he really kind of protected the cast from the show being worse than it already was.
Was there stuff going on behind the scenes that he put a stop to?
We plumb the depths of Memory Alpha when we do our reviews. I don't know how much you've ever touched on that when you've been doing your own
I always
content.
look at Memory Alpha when I'm, but I mean, some of the early stuff I might not have looked at, but whenever I'm doing an episode, it's so much information.
It is. We're finding out, unfortunately, too much when it comes to doing DS9, by the way, if you ever end up deciding to do more content along those lines.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll overwhelm you. But the Enterprise narrative really is, Scott Bakula is such a professional that he was really protecting everybody else from kind of the shitty writing, because he had enough cachet as an industry veteran to be able to kind of push back on things the way no one else could, which was unique, I think, a lot in terms of Berman era Trek, because a lot of these guys that got hired, like even Kate Mulgrew, she was certainly somebody that was a veteran actor, but she did soap operas, right? Like she was in Ryan's Hope. She wasn't somebody
Mrs.
that
Columbo also, I think you're forgetting.
It's true. I am forgetting Columbo. You're absolutely right. But she didn't really have the ability to push back on the writers the same way the guy from Quantum Leap does, you know?
It's interesting.
Yeah, there was a clear indication that like he was a leader in the cast to try and regulate some of the bad impulses that were coming through. I didn't know if that had ever shown up in some of the material you had seen.
No, I do remember seeing an interview with Scott Bakula around the time. I forget what show he was on, but the host brought out like a magazine with Jolene Blaylock in a bikini on the front, like, one of your co-stars. You ever see her like this? And he just goes, no, and then ended that. Which was, I think, great, because they're like, horny, and he's shut up. Basically.
I got enough of that when they duct taped her boobs in my face and we both fell over in Shadows of Pajem. We had to stop that.
Yeah.
Is that what happened? He said, like, let's not do this?
I'm assuming, because that whole thing was weird there. The one hard example I know of him, like, kind of directing things, the episode with the transporter, we called it Planet Reefer Madness. It was one of the real early ones, and they had the guy get sticks and twigs transported in his brain. Yeah. And they're like, he's going to die.
Tourists and shit. Yeah. I remember that one.
Let's bring my dog to the surface so it can get a UTI, and then we're all going to go crazy. That was supposed to be the first death, and he's like, this doesn't seem like it's a good place to put the emotional weight of our first crew death in there. Let's not. And they rewrote it, and everything from Voyager, which was basically these scripts were ironclad, and you couldn't deviate, one word off sentence without picking up the red phone on the wall and calling the writer's room, and 2 hours of arguing before that change could happen. So, of course, in the end, they end up breaking out that first character death for when they go to the Delphic Expanse, and the old fur trapper space pirates who used to be good guys, but now they're mean because their faces are twisted off by anomalies like Shank.
Okay, so the twig guy was supposed to die, but then he didn't die. Is that how?
That was just, we don't want our first on-screen death to be something small. We want to go big.
Okay.
So I don't know. It was interesting to see this guy exercising that muscle on the set against what had previously just been locked in diamond scripts that could not be edited under any circumstance.
I wonder if part of that came from him having his own production company not that long before, because he did have a company where he made like the Mr. and Mrs. Smith show and I think some movies and stuff. And I wonder if he got used to that kind of thing.
I think you get to a point in Hollywood where your name is a brand and you have to protect it. And maybe there was stuff in the contract that's like, I get some degree of veto capacity because I don't want you guys to drag me through shit, even though you're going to drag me through the shit anyways, as it turns out.
Yeah. I mean, I everything I've ever heard about him is being such a nice guy.
Yeah.
Like the kind of guy that would like help the stagehands like move stuff on set and like break things down rather than just going to his trailer. So it's interesting that he like exercised that power to change things. I wish that it had turned out better.
Yeah. It's a shame that it didn't wind up in the hands of someone who understood the show's potential until it was too late. Which,
I mean, it maybe he was just kind of fixing things that were already kind of broken. Like, it's not like he was running the show, but I don't know.
I think that they were betting on having that 7-year season roadmap, and that they just spun it up way too slow. And again, season 1 was in season two especially were just so bad that nobody survived contact with it. And by the time they got things right with season 3 and season 4,
the writing was way too much I hate you, Dad type of like attitude, and they treated Archer like he was a petulant child, and like nothing shows that more than frankly the Night in Sickbay episode, right? Like
it's the worst tendencies for that character.
Yeah.
Like he had good episodes, but that is one of the worst for Archer.
Switching into Voyager, which has become very, very popular in the years since its release, a big part of that was Netflix and the easy accessibility of the entire Star Trek catalog before Paramount, or whatever the hell it used to be prior to that. And they basically took it away from the masses. But like everybody had seen Next Gen, and DS9 was very popular. Voyager was like the forgotten stepchild for a big chunk of the audience. And it, many times Voyager was pretty great. Like, what is your what's your viewpoint on Voyager as a whole, going back and watching it in the 2020s?
Well, I said this in a video, and I think it's a pretty good summary of my feelings on Voyager. I love everything about it except for the show part. Because they had all the stuff. They had such a great premise going in. They have great actors. They have all of the things they need to be successful, but they're hampered by so many things that made the execution just miss the mark. Like they throw away their premise immediately in a way that
no serialization whatsoever.
No serialization, but even if you made it episodic, they didn't use anything with the Maquis to the point that the actors forgot that was the plot of it. Like if you listen to any of Garrett Wang and
Delta Flyers.
Delta Flyers. Yes, I do remember in their like pilot episode, they're like, "Oh, I forgot that was the plot of it was the Maquis and all that."
Yeah.
They didn't remember because like there was so many things they could have done with it to make it an interesting, different Star Trek show, but instead it was like the Next Generation, the crappy version.
They basically gave up on it after the first season. The season finale of the truncated.
It wasn't even the first season. It felt like just like immediately they're like, I don't know, Chakotay is just her like butt kisser part of the crew now, and it's like you had so many things you could have done with this.
It was spun gold. The amount of conflict and raw stuff that could have been going on there, and they immediately backed to like, oh, this is too prickly. This is too real, and we want Space Friends versus the alien of the week that has dried bologna stuck in their hair.
Yeah, and I think like they hit on something kind of accidental when they got 7 of 9 in there, because clearly it was a fan service thing. They're like, here's a sexy lady, we're bringing the sexy lady onto the cast. But they had such an interesting idea with it, and Jerry Ryan is such a good actor. I feel like they accidentally hit on something really good.
Yeah, so I think it was very much our premise too. Was they hired a set of titties, but also Jerry Ryan happened to also be a good actress attached to them, and they came to that realization around season 5. Right, season 4, it was shoot her low, make sure her butt's in frame. Let's maximize the fan service, but then. Oh yeah, Jerry Ryan, I guess you're actually good at this. We should probably develop your character, and you'll end up basically being the co-lead of the show as we go through the rest of the seasons.
Yeah, I think like her and the Doctor really were the strongest characters that they had, and they had really interesting stories with them. It's just overarching stories like around it are just not very good.
You, of course, touched on the favorite part of any Voyager fans' repertoire of complaints, and that is Fairhaven / Spirit Folk. And some of your videos. We so dreaded doing those. We even brought in like extra help to like go through them. Some of our fellow podcasting friends when we reviewed them ourselves, and we agree with everything you had to say.
How much use did you get out of delete the wife?
What we did get the same amount of juice of, and something we agree with you on, is that Voyager became a crew of LARPers, and that they had these constant different LARPs that they participated in.
Oh yeah,
because
they would create a set and then use it for like a season rather than like switching out whenever they had a story around it, because they're like, we built this tiki set and you're gonna have to use it. We built Fairhaven, you're gonna have to use it. You're gonna have to go to this French pool hall. And it's like, why is everyone hanging out here? I don't know, because that's the set we have.
we came up with our own headcanon that they became LARPers out of boredom. They're stuck in the Delta Quadrant. They have a bunch of time.
I feel like that's something I just really enjoy about Star Trek in general, not just Voyager, that everyone became a LARPer.
Yeah.
They don't watch TV. They want to be LARPers. So they're like, in my downtime, I'm going to go pretend to be a Viking and then hang out on the holodeck.
They even became LARPers. They even became LARPers for themselves. The coworker murder simulator that Seska was in. They even LARPed as themselves as part of a plot.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to play pretend today.
I have a question for you with all of this in mind. If you were going to suggest a LARP to the Voyager crew, like, okay, guys, Tom, Harry, here's the next LARP. Because you guys are obviously the cultural tastemakers of the ship. So here's the next LARP to put out there. What would you suggest to them? What would work for the Voyager crew?
I don't know. I mean, I think
keep in mind, you got like a 1 in 5 chance whatever you're doing is going to go rogue and try and kill you in the process. So,
it's always that's how they always go. I don't know. I mean, I think the one that worked the best for them was the Captain Proton stuff.
Oh yeah,
that was really fun. I guess I would just want to go into that. I don't know if there's one that I think would really work well for the crew. I liked that.
Rite of Chaotica might be my favorite Voyager episode. As it's definitely my favorite comedic Trek episode, I think, of all time.
That might be the next one I cover. I think it's doing well in the Patreon poll. So,
please do.
Talking about Rite of Chaotica, I did really enjoy that, and I think it was one of the ones that was honest about Janeway, making her a villain, and I think that's some of the more successful Voyager episodes.
The look that she gives Tom Paris after she sees the outfit that she's going to have to wear as Queen Arachna. Here, boss, here's the fucking sexy outfit you're going to have to wear to pull this LARP down.
You're on report. You know what that means.
She just hands it back to him and says, I'm a size 2, right? It's just fine. Draw it up, Tom. You're the fucking weirdo here.
What was your thought on all the Borg stuff? Speaking of Janeway being the ultimate villain.
Oh yeah.
They totally nerfed the fucking Borg in Voyager. They used to mean something. They used to be scary, and then they would just open episodes with, well, we blew up a ship, whatever. They'd be like, oh, you put the Borg technology on the ship and you could use it, and they're like, we got rid of it or whatever. And you could have done something with your ship hobbled together with different stuff, and they're like, Yeah, they nerfed them, and the Borg babies hanging out with fucking Seven all the time. I'm like, do not care about fucking Borg babies.
Child actors in Trek is rough. But her decision, we need to get home, but the Borg are in this big fight with this terrible space CGI. So rather than just say, hey, 120 people on the ship, we're going to have to live here, because the other option is to forge an alliance that is going to let the Borg effectively win their war and not die and continue to go out and just wreck the entire universe because we want to get home. At that point I watched it, I was like, she's a very bad person.
Oh, she's a terrible person. Janeway is the biggest villain of Voyager.
Yeah.
And I enjoy watching it, thinking of it that way, because she's just insane. And part of the reason she is like she is because UPN or the network or Paramount or whatever, whoever was in charge, didn't want her to seem weak because she was the first female captain to star in a show. So she had to be right on everything. But it was just no one could question her orders. She was constantly a dictator over them. And I feel like a lot of people think oh, you can't criticize Janeway or you're being sexist. You don't like a strong woman. It's that's not it, though. I think she was written really badly. Kate Mulgrew was playing her like she was bipolar.
Yes.
She couldn't figure out where she was at any point because she kept flip-flopping all over the place.
It's so refreshing to talk to somebody who really understands things the way that we understand them. We spent a lot of time talking about the writer schizophrenia that comes to Janeway's writing and how that was probably the biggest villain of the show. Kate Mulgrew's an excellent actress. I don't think that anyone would come away from watching Voyager thinking anything else. But she's constantly put in indefensible positions with her own character because the writers determine that that's the only way that they can make the plot work. And it's to the detriment of not only just her, but the show as a whole as a coherent storytelling. It makes Janeway seem like a crazed villain, just exactly the way you portray her in your videos.
Yeah, she is. And like, I think in the episode Tuvix, this came
Which
up.
episode?
Tuvix.
Tuvix?
I'm not familiar with that.
No one ever talks about Tuvix. But Tuvix is a good example of this, because Tuvix I don't think is inherently a bad episode. I think it has a really interesting plot.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of great scenes in it, like a lot of great acting. But really where it falls apart isn't that Janeway made the wrong decision, because there's no right decision here. It's that no one questions her on it. The whole crew has to like let her make the call on this. And like, it just really hurts the whole episode. That could have been one that people maybe debate, but don't constantly be like, Janeway made the wrong decision on it. I don't know.
Everyone on that bridge just looks at him like
stone cold.
Yeah.
Stone cold.
12 hours ago, we were all pals, and you were making omelets in the mess hall, and you're my soon-to-be daughter's godfather. She lays out like, fuck him, he's dead. And everybody's like, yeah, he's gone. Like,
they look with them in disgust of like, how dare you protest being murdered in front of all of us?
Yeah.
Who are these people? Are they the T-1000 silver alien like fake crew again? Did I just get like roped into another Ringer episode?
I know you're good people. And are they good people?
I gotta ask.
Like Kes goes over to Janeway about this, like, I want Neelix back, and she's like, he never should have got you involved. Like, how dare he ask to spare his life? What the fuck's wrong with you?
Have you watched Lower Decks?
Yes.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Do you caught
the Tuvix episode? Yeah.
I mean, how good? How perfect?
She straight up murdered it.
Yes, like Freeman coming to the tragic realization that Janeway's solution was just to kill him. She was so confident, like, oh, I'm sure that Starfleet legend Catherine Janeway came up with a novel solution to this problem.
The fact that Janeway kept getting promoted despite doing all these terrible things, she had to have some dirt on someone. Like when I forget what movie it was, where they show that she's
Nemesis,
an admiral, but it's like, what the fuck is that? Why is she a fucking admiral now after all this?
Well, as we know,
time travel to save two guys and fuck everyone else over. That's my finale.
Allison, as we know, Starfleet admirals are universally evil.
Hey,
so
there you go.
She showed she fit in. She's promotional material, right? Like
HR's looking at her resume of like evil, and they're like, "Oh,
that's a keeper.
This is a straight shooter with upper management written all over."
That's admiral material right here. Bring her in.
Yeah,
move over in a Chev. There's a new queen in town.
You changed time because you were sad about it. Come on in, girl. Water's fine. Let's go.
So let me get this straight. You gave the Borg a hall pass so they could just continue running over the quadrant, but you also have all this hot shit Borg tech and other like cool stuff you're bringing back from the Delta Quadrant, but you've got a password on it. Well, we really want that stuff, so Admiral Bars it is. There you go. Now what's that password?
There was some episode, I think it was the fight episode with The Rock or whatever. I don't know. It was one of them where they open and then they're talking, like Janeway's talking to Chakotay, and then she's like, Neelix is trying to use the Borg technology to help his cooking or something. Ha ha ha. And they laugh and then leave. And it's like, what? You're gonna put Borg technology? This is one of the dumbest things I've ever heard.
Nanoprobes, also known as pixie fairy dust. Yeah.
Yeah. Who needs salt? We got nanoprobes.
And then they got so focused on making everything about the Borg. When they went to Enterprise, they're like, shit, we want to do a Borg episode. We haven't done a Borg episode, but they're not supposed to know the Borg. I don't know. They met the Borg before they met the Borg. I don't need to keep doing the Borg.
My controversial opinion was that episode mostly worked, except for the fact that Dr. Phlox somehow beat assimilation using question mark.
Radiation, right?
Yeah.
Stupid.
Yeah, that was a stupid episode. You're taking peak. That was my week. I think that was our weakest shit award for that season. Was that you're taking peak Borg power, which is first contact Borg, and that they didn't just take over the entire world at that point instantly and walk through everybody. There's a real phenomenon with Braga era, Berman era, which is ramrodding, and there's a story here. We're going to start with the punchline, and we're just going to force it to happen regardless of common sense or any other barrier. And how, I don't know, I'm assuming they were just surrounded by yes men that were afraid to say what, like how do you feel that this is all appropriate? The whole thing suffered for it.
I have a question about the show that really brought us together, and that's Vox Sola. Okay, so your video on Vox Sola was
all
amazing.
coming back around,
by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. All of your content, by the way, we haven't talked much about it, but you have done reviews not just of some select Enterprise and Voyager episodes, but really touching on the best of the best garbage when it comes to Trek as a whole, TOS era, even TNG. I think your most recent one was like Dead of Honor, which was like that classically incredibly racist TNG episode.
Oh yeah, Code of Honor. The comment section on that, a real dog shit.
Yeah,
I just gotta say,
I felt bad for you on that one. Like, listen. It is racist, all right? Like it just is
racist. There's a section of people in the fandom, and it's not everyone. It's just a very loud minority who they can't take any sort of jokes, and they don't like saying bad things about it. Like this was racist. They think it's either a personal attack or nothing can be criticized from the show.
Calling something racist is not to say that they had like incredibly ill intent. But it does stereotype people very specifically in a way that is correct to call it racist. Like,
yeah, I don't think that it was intentionally meant to be racist, and I don't think all of TNG sucks. I like Star Trek, or I wouldn't be talking about it, and I wouldn't know the stuff that I talk about unless I'd seen good episodes of it too. But yeah, there's a lot of people who they don't like having any sort of humor about it, and they don't like any jokes criticizing it.
Well, your jokes are amazing. Your content constantly has me rolling.
The stuff I listened to from you guys, I enjoyed too, because I appreciated that you guys are fans of it, but you saw the ridiculousness of parts of it and the criticisms without saying like this all sucks. It's just that's what this is.
It's good to be real about the things that you love, otherwise you get lost in it. But Vox Sola. I mean, we started with this, and ultimately I think we need to conclude our conversation about it because of all of your content, this was the stuff I couldn't stop watching. You found all this behind the scenes stuff from the DVD extras?
It was on the Blu-ray. I was just ripping the Blu-ray, and I didn't know that was on there, and I saw there was a special feature, and it was specifically on that episode, so it provided a lot of interesting information.
Was there anything that you saw about anyone acknowledging we made a giant cum monster? I've never found.
No, it was everyone dancing around it. It's everyone dancing around it, and they weren't intending to do it. What's her name? Roxanne Dawson.
Yes,
was the director of that episode, and she was just trying to piece this together without even having a fourth act. It wasn't even finished. Like they didn't have the whole script finished when they started it. She had to create this giant monster, and they used saran wrap that they melted, and then she started adding goo to it. And it's like, once you get to that point, like you have to go with what you have because you're on a TV schedule. You have 7-8 days, however much to film this.
Just get some of that Crystal Light, like cherry squeeze flavor and put in there so it's red. I think if they
had thought ahead of time to make the goo a different color, because I get you're not going to find a bunch of red saran wrap or whatever, but they didn't have to make the goo white. But I think they just had to keep bulldozing through after a certain point because they have such a tight schedule.
Wasn't that her directorial debut too?
No, she did the Full Stop episodes, I think, before that, right? And then she did, I think, at least one Voyager episode. I recall.
It wasn't her first one, or they would have mentioned it.
Yeah,
but it certainly was a tough one for her to handle.
the shots of the behind the scenes of how difficult all of that was to create from like a practical and then CG perspective was certainly something.
Yeah, I think like it's a miracle that it came together into anything, even though like it looks like a jizz monster. If it didn't look like jizz, I think it would still be kind of a middling episode, but it wouldn't.
Could have been a really cool space horror episode. Like if you had that thing digesting people and like merging them into like a shared like there were elements of really great space horror there, and unfortunately had the main cast stuck in it. And thank you for hammering relentlessly on the water polo.
Oh, God, yes.
Oh, the water polo. His bland-ass water polo interest. Yeah.
Would you call it, though, he's the whitest man who would ever be in space?
The whitest man who ever whited in his white interest of water polo. And they kept trying to make it a thing, along with Porthos cheese jokes. And you're like, you're just not going to make these happen. Enterprise.
Until he's cleaning up, like, diarrhea stains out of his space carpeting, the cheese stuff never had a chance to really turn into anything.
Yeah, we never saw consequences. It's like we had supposed, what was it, that Silic had kept showing up and feeding him cheese, and he was shitting all over the place. And that was how he was
Is
really
this
getting
like
back on him.
Chekhov's cheese joke? The fact we never saw the end of that?
Maybe that's bonus content somewhere, as like the Seth MacFarlane ensign that was tasked with having to go in and like scrub the captain's
Oh
quarters.
shit, I forgot Seth MacFarlane had a cameo as an ensign.
Twice
This was season
cameos.
4?
Twice.
Did you watch any of
Brilliant.
Orville?
Oh yeah. Orville is the most depressing comedy you'll ever see.
I think it's great Trek though, man.
It is great Trek, but it is so depressing, and they're like, it's a parody.
It's
not a parody.
it's like it went too
It's just
far in one
Star Trek.
direction, right? Like it started out as very
It's a
lighthearted,
good show though.
and they felt like they had to like earn their stripes as a serious show, and it's like you went too
It's
serious.
because they had to, because Seth MacFarlane wanted to do Star Trek and he couldn't do Star Trek.
Yes.
And he's like, it's a parody. And then after like the first season, they're like, let's just do Star Trek. And it's all the most depressing shit in the world. But it's well done. Like, it's well done depressing shit, but it's not a parody anymore. He just wanted to do Star Trek.
Yeah, I thought they're like, he approached Fox as like, hey, let's do Family Guy in space. And they're like, yeah. And they're like, what the fuck is this?
They began Orville kind of like Lower Decks started, where it's like the Seth MacFarlane shitty humor where I'm like, this is really bad. And then it turned around. Like the first time I watched Lower Decks, I watched like the first episode, and it was a lot of that kind of Family Guy humor. And I'm like, I don't know if this is for me. And then I got COVID, so I was like, all right, I need something to watch. So
Time
we
for
watched
content.
Lower
We're just
Decks.
sitting here suffering.
Yeah. So yeah, me and my husband both had it, and we binged through Lower Decks, and we're like, this is great.
Yes.
But when it started, it was exactly what I thought it would be, is that kind of Family Guy shitty humor.
Mariner was rough. And they really found a way to zero in on her character and make her great.
Yeah.
Season one was a little too much Rick and Morty in space, but
Yeah.
they've tamed their own impulses. And I actually think that just one more season is all that show needs. I know it's maybe a controversial opinion because people are upset it got canceled, but you know, sometimes you get to the end of the joke and you just need to stop. And I think they're almost there. I have one more. I forgot we hadn't talked about Dear Doctor. A show that you mentioned that it both offended and bored you was something that, along with your singing.
Oh yeah, Angry and Bored was how I felt after that episode, and that's how a lot of Enterprise in the first couple seasons was, where it's like, it's infuriating, but it's also
the worst
really
crime
boring.
Star Trek can commit is to waste your time. You know, you can either put content in that like you pull up later and go, oh, I remember that time that Tuvok went off to go pray his emotions away, or you can have like legit good, but then there's just like those time waster episodes. You're like, I don't feel like I came out with anything. And sometimes even the bad episodes can make you so mad that you're like, at least, you know, I got some good joke content off of it.
I feel like a lot of Voyager is like that, where it makes you mad, but you can kind of laugh at it, and you thought something. But Enterprise, a lot of it makes you mad, and you just come away feeling nothing.
You said
well, Dear Doctor, you come away with
a feeling. You said something really interesting in the episode, and I wanted to ask you about it, which was that they rewrote the ending so that no one opposed Archer. But like that's
the same thing they were doing with Voyager. They like, you can't question the captain.
Gotcha. So the fact that Archer reaches this incredibly illogical conclusion that Phlox inflicts him with for no particular reason was a studio note is just, I think, the icing on the cake of why that episode falls apart.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
is kind of an archetype of like Star Trek writing failing, right? Like they wanted to do this big episode of how the idea of the Prime Directive started, and then it came and it just fell apart on them.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it had ended how they intended it to, and again, this came from Memory Alpha, so thank you to everyone from Memory Alpha for all of your meticulous notes. But if they had ended it how they intended to, which was Phlox has the cure but doesn't tell anyone about it to let evolution or whatever the fuck do the genocide for him, it still would have been a shitty episode. But the fact they're like, he can't go against what the captain says, so the captain has to be on board for this. So now they both want to commit genocide. It's like, this is really bad too. Like,
the worst decision I've seen made in Star Trek that tainted those characters permanently for the duration of the show. Like, it wasn't until late season 4 I was able to like fully forgive Phlox for being a fucking monster, and Archer for that matter too.
Yeah,
to the point where they actually really had to.
Phlox was doing a lot of shit in between then. Dear Doctor was real early in, and then he was like cloning Trip to harvest organs and shit. He was doing something.
And it was specifically that episode that we were reflecting on Dear Doctor to say, like, the ethics of this shouldn't be questionable to someone like Phlox, right? Like, it doesn't actually make any sense, right? Like, Phlox,
delete the species.
Yeah, Phlox was okay with essentially being party to genocide, but he's not okay with cloning a guy. Like, this seems to not work, right? Like, it would be one thing if he was okay with it and he was never bothered, and it's really down to Archer having to struggle with that, like, moral choice because, you know, he's a human. But the fact that it's Phlox who's like, I don't know about this, boss, it's like, that doesn't make any fucking sense.
I don't know. It was all over the place. There were a lot of things in Voyager and Enterprise where it makes you feel angry by the end of it because, like, it's supposed to be some sort of moral story in it, but what story are they actually telling you? It's not actually like this is a difficult decision they had to make. It's an interesting episode because of that. Like, DS9 had In the Pale Moonlight, where it's like, this is really like ambiguous, but really well done.
Yeah, no, it fit the mood of the story, and it left you feeling ambiguous as to how you should feel about it.
Yeah, but they would have these things in Enterprise where they would just make a really shitty decision and be like, the captain was right to do it, because they can't question them, and then it just makes them seem like monsters. They have that, like, progenitor episode in Enterprise where they have the, like, third gender who's kind of a slave to these people, and then, like, Trip teaches them how to read, and then, like, Archer's like, they committed suicide because you taught them how to read.
You taught them feelings.
You're at fault for this. You taught them feelings. Fuck you.
Take that episode. Cut Trip as the offended American that's out to bring liberty to this oppressed person, and put Hoshi in there, the educator, the compassionate, the person that's not by the book, and that could went from such a train wreck shitbag episode to something really great.
Yeah, we had a lot of problems with Enterprise in specific that they really wasted Hoshi as a character, that they had something interesting
they started out with her really good, and then they forgot about her.
Yeah, and her as someone who, like, your first main character that doesn't really want to be there. She doesn't really want to be in Starfleet. She's there because she's very scientifically interested in what's going on, and B, has this deep, we think, essentially confirmed past relationship with Archer that kind of gives her this sort of ingrained loyalty to him that goes beyond really just like a relationship between, you know, officer and supervisor. And
if you hadn't seen the pilot, would you even know they had that relationship? That's what really sucks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's a strong subtext through a lot of their conversations and the way that she talks to him casually that really hints like she doesn't care about rank, and these are people that have some sort of a relationship, I think heavily romantic, in the past, that for her to have this hall pass just to get away with what she gets away with.
But
I'll have to think about that next time.
That's our favorite headcanon is Hoshi and Archer used to be a couple, and she broke up with him specifically.
Yeah,
I did like in one they had the Ryza triple feature where will they get to Ryza or not, and then when they got there, she just had a good time.
Yeah, she just got laid,
she just had sex,
hanging out,
had a good time.
Yeah.
Everyone else had a bad time, but Hoshi had a good time. So
well, something has to offset her bad time she has any other episode she's heavily featured in, whether it's transporter hell. Falling out of the ceiling.
Transporter hell. You're talking about the one where no one can see her and she's running around in her workout outfit. I thought that one was one of the fucking worst for like wasting potential with her, because wasn't it like it didn't happen in the end?
Not even potential for her, but like flesh out like the complete torture hell that the transporter could be, and just squander all of it, man.
That was another time waster episode for sure.
She could have been the first psychic in the Federation when like that ugly bug guy
Count Molestula, yeah. But like the fact that she took about Jehothing down there is like, hey, Hoshi, you're gonna have to hang out with this guy for a few days. Bring cocktail dresses, nothing else. Like just their shirt falling off randomly in the season 2 premiere for no reason.
Where she jumps through the thing and her shirt comes off. I'm like, fucking Enterprise.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah, God. Golly gee willikers, guys, my shirt must be in Brandon Braga's office. Who knew?
Oh.
You know what I think was a really great early storyline for Enterprise was when Hoshi's trying to figure out Reed's favorite food. That was really, I think,
paired with the episode where there's like the butt plug aliens are showing up to possibly kill them all.
And eat them.
Yeah, and eat them. Like, by the way, does he like pineapple or not?
Does he like pineapple or not? And then Reed's sitting there like, I'm a great character. And you're like, he's so fucking boring. And then they're like, we'll make him more interesting with the Section 13 stuff. And it's like, did you though? Did you make him more interesting?
Was frequently the worst part of the show.
Yeah.
Reed sucks.
Yeah, you point this out in your videos very well, by the way, that he's both boring and sucks. You know,
yeah.
Had like her efforts to find what his favorite pizza topping was, like somehow ended with her getting into like the micro fridge in his room and finding a Ziploc bag full of severed pinkies. Like if he was the secret serial killer or it's just something sinister, like I could have excused a lot of his nonsense, but for being a Space Go guy, he was just miserable.
When they started out with Reed, I believe he was going to be the first outwardly gay character in Star Trek.
Really?
Yeah, he was. And then they decided, no, we want straights only. So he would have all these awkward dialogues like, I saw T'Pol's bum or whatever. And you're like, it made him seem more gay because it seemed like he didn't really.
Trying too hard.
Yeah,
let me tell you about all the girls I slept with, Trip. You'll love all these stories.
Yeah. And then they're like, what if instead of gay, we made him really boring? And that's what they did.
Was there a rewrite for him that you would put out there as like, this is how you would have made Reed not suck? Because like being the British military officer clearly was just a total mismatch. There was just no reason for that.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I would have made him gay, but that doesn't make him not boring. It just makes him gay and boring.
That's true.
Some of Discovery is like that, but gay and boring. But I don't know. I would have given him something. I described his personality as a loud sniff because that's about all I get out of him most of the time.
We've done an hour here, Allison. I think we could do another hour, frankly. You are a fantastic person to talk about Trek with. You mentioned you might soon be doing one of our favorite episodes, so we'll let your patrons vote, and we hope that you'll continue to doing Trek videos in the future. It's all fantastic.
Thanks.
For my 2 cents, I would ask at any point, do you have any desire to do Knight Rider content?
I did a Halloween episode of Knight Rider.
I'm going to have to track that one down.
Yeah,
I missed
Knight
that
Rider
somehow.
is... I enjoy Knight Rider, but it's like there are some really, really fun episodes and a lot of really boring episodes where you got to watch dudes in 3-piece suits do stock 80s plots, and they're like, how do we get the car involved? But if you watch the good episodes, then you'll see, like evil car against Kit, and the Halloween one's a really fun one. They do a Psycho parody with it, and they go to the Psycho house, but they only have the exterior, so they're like, let's go to the thing next to the house because we don't have the interiors, and they play the Psycho music, and the stunt double for Norman Bates is there playing Norman Baines. It's pretty good. There's a witch too.
Aside from your excellent YouTube channel, Allison Pregler, is there anything else that you would like to alert people to in terms of content that you're creating?
I don't know, just watch my stuff. If you like Trek, you'll like my Trek videos, I think. Or maybe you'll hate them.
Your Charmed
videos,
but check them by the way, are something that my wife has enjoyed as she's rediscovered your content upon our conversation. So.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I do a lot of Charmed stuff as well. Charmed, I'm not as attached to as Trek. It's kind of sucks, but in an interesting way.
And I guess because you do Charmed, which is an Aaron Spelling television show, have you ever heard of Kindred the Embraced?
Oh yeah, I've seen Kindred the Embraced. That was a great show that never was because one of the leads passed away while they were making it. But if you want to check out an interesting almost show, Kindred's pretty cool.
Peter and I are friends for the last 20 years because we were vampire LARPers. So we have
you played the game. Maybe someday in the future,
Joe, she's got real audience numbers
to talk about Kindred the Embraced. You would be the right person
to rewatch it. I remember next to nothing now except that it was well done. It's very short.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Allison. We can't appreciate it enough. And please go.
Thanks for having me.
If you're somehow someone who has not subscribed to Allison's YouTube channel, you should do that immediately. And thanks.
And if anyone's listening that is from my audience, check out the rest of their stuff. It's pretty funny.
Thank you very much.
I got a Knight Rider episode to go watch, so if you'll excuse me.